you might see a totally different landscape of golf if we don't get our education system more organized.
And you're not even just talking about golf specific at this point. We're talking about the American educational system in general.
Well, yeah.
Should I have not said that? Should I have kept that in the bag? I don't know. Is that too real?
No, I keep it real. I'm wearing big boy pants.
Folks, in this episode of Big Boy Pants Golf, we're going to talk about how search engine optimization is affecting the collective golf consciousness, including golf instruction. I've got one of these guys that, let's say it's 2 in the morning and you're watching YouTube videos and YouTube suggests a video and boom, Alex Moore Golf pops in my feed. I'm fascinated by this dude. I see you with a stick hitting an impact bag.
How much speed can you create with just a little tiny P3 backswing? Like how fast can we get these hands and arms jumping back in front of us with just a tiny little backswing? Can we get the club head speed jumping? Get that parametric acceleration unloading, you know? So I would be doing a lot of little like P3 to 9 drill.
And it's like, this guy's like the Bruce Lee of golf. Alex, great to have you on the show. Tell us all about yourself.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a golf coach. I do online golf coaching through the Skillest app. I've been doing it for, well, I first got into coaching after college golf, so I've been in it for about 10 years now. Probably started in about 2013. I grew up as a competitive golfer, so my grandpa started me when I was 6, started playing tournaments when I was 10 or 11. So I'm very familiar with the golf instruction landscape from a student's perspective. I went through, junior golf, high school golf, got a scholarship to Oregon State, played college golf, had a couple good years there, played a little bit of pro golf, and then started getting into the coaching side of things. So some experience from a player's perspective, but also from a coach's perspective, and it's been interesting to see just the ebbs and flows of golf instruction in my short period of time that I've been in the game. And now being on the coaching end of it and having a little different perspective has been a fun experience.
Well, in terms of your instructional videos, I always see a little bit of Jack Nicklas in there, but to me it's weird. I think you are a non-David Ledbetter type guy.
Ooh, what does that mean?
Well, there was a period in time where this guy, I believe he's from South Africa.
David? I think
David
so.
Ledbetter. Or
yeah,
he's one of those countries, and he went around sadistically ruining people's swings. Like no one could stop him. He was ruining swing after swing.
Now from here, as he starts to move, the club will shallow out into this position. We can see the club face is in a very different position. It almost looks slightly open, but this allows him then to actually rotate his arm down, square the club face off, and go ahead and release it.
Now he's popping up, selling this golf swing app thing you put on your club to make sure that the club stays outside your hands.
This training aid is quite possibly the most over-engineered piece of equipment in the history of training aids. When I first saw the infomercial for this, I was blown away by, one, how complicated you could make something or over-engineer it, and two, how expensive this device is for what it does.
And I know I've seen you in an Instagram video, and I love your style where you're almost like Plato or Aristotle. You teach by questioning. You're like, hey, you can do A or B. Which one is actually, right? And then it's like, it's not the way David Ledbetter's teaching. Clubs shouldn't be outside your hands. On the way back, it should match up with your hands.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, the takeaway and the A swing versus the tour takeaway. It's just interesting how things get marketed in the golf world. And I know when I was coaching at a company called Tathata Golf.
And go. Good. Watch this again as he does this. There's a strength.
At that point in time, the online kind of Instagram, YouTube stuff was getting really big. And with Gankas, I think he had, Matt Wolf coming out. Like Matt hadn't come out yet. He was still in college, but he was on his way up. And George was teaching a very kind of like steep going back and then shallow in transition. kind of a la Matt Wolf. And at around that time, I saw Ledbetter coming out with the A swing. So they were teaching kind of a very similar model. And I was kind of wondering to myself, is he trying to beat George Gankas to market with a new swing style? And then now you see, you know, a lot of tour takeaway where they're teaching P1 to P2 more traditionally. And so it's just fascinating how things change and ebb and flow. And if I was a Ledbetter certified instructor and you went from teaching the A swing to the tour takeaway all of a sudden, I'd be like, what the heck? You know, I told all these guys we're doing it this way, and now we're doing it that way. And why are things changing?
Well, in terms of the tour takeaway, I mean, it seems like so often right now they want you to have the hands inside and the club outside, the hands on the way back, as per the David Ledbetter device. Whereas obviously you got a couple of superstars, Matt Fitzpatrick, John Rahm. That club gets inside pretty quickly.
And there's guys that take it back more outside. So the takeaway, you kind of get bounced around with the takeaway. I remember, you know, as a player, you kind of want to know where's P2, where am I supposed to be when the club first hits parallel to the ground? You know, because if you're inside, let's say you go outside with the hands and inside with the club head, then someone says, well, now you got to keep the club head outside and keep the hands inside. Well, where am I trying to get to? When am I done? You know, where is P2 supposed to be? If I was Iron Byron and I was trying to map out the geometry of this golf swing, where would I want P2 to be? So as I got deeper into golf coaching and golf instruction and theories and lineages of information, all roads kind of lead to a guy named Mac O'Grady. And you kind of figure out, wow, okay, so a lot of the top golf instructors in the industry are just kind of remixing and rebranding stuff that he figured out in the 80s and the early 90s. So from our perspective, if I'm looking at position 2, where's the club supposed to be when it first hits parallel to the ground? From my perspective, I want to see the golf club on the butt of club line when it hits parallel to the ground, and I want to see the golf club at the butt of club height when it first hits parallel to the ground. If I'm tracing the plane line or tracing the baseline, if you can see, I don't know if you can see this wooden stick on the ground. Can you see this okay here?
I see it perfect.
Okay, so if I'm swinging down this line right here, there's a concept called tracing the baseline. So we say we want the lowest part of the golf club to always trace the baseline. And the baselines can shift around and you can move them around, but assuming we're trying to hit the ball pretty straight, from my perspective, the lowest part of the club would be the hosel. So you can kind of envision if there was like a laser coming out of the hosel of the club, I want that laser to point at this line until the golf club first hits parallel to the ground, and at that point it should be parallel to that line. But it's from the perspective of if you're looking down the shaft. So as I'm looking down this shaft, you can see the club head itself is going to stay on the arc, but the shaft itself is going to be tracing the baseline as I'm going back. So a lot of people think you take the club straight down the line, now all of a sudden the laser's pointing out here. So that was the takeaway was always a big question mark, because you get inside and then someone says you got to be outside. Well, then now I feel the weight of the club radically differently. I mean, if you're used to going inside and keeping the club head low and underneath your hands, you're going to feel the weight a certain way. If you all of a sudden start kicking the club head outside and getting it more vertical, now you feel the weight of the club radically differently. So that changes the whole rhythm of the golf swing, the whole tempo of the golf swing, the feeling of where the face is, the feeling of where the weight is. That kind of sets up the whole, tempo of the golf swing. So figuring out where I want P2 to be, where that alignment is, was very, very beneficial. And these alignments have been mapped out for many, many years. It's not, something new. The geometry's been there and figured out for quite some time. It's just the access to the information isn't always readily available. So you kind of have to go digging for it and figure out who kind of, there's levels within golf instruction and who really, really knows their stuff. And getting to those top level guys is always a challenge.
In terms of search engine optimization, I feel like Mac O'Grady's instruction is kicked to the bottom. You'd really have to go digging down there to find it.
Yeah, I don't know if he even wants it out there. As it relates to like a David Ledbetter type guy, there's stories about, you know, Ledbetter going to Mac schools back in the 80s and early 90s, and, you know, guys taking that information and then going out and writing books, and, you know, taking that information and going out and making careers for themselves off of that information. You know, so I think IP protection wasn't really something thought about back then, and it might not still be very thought about in the golf industry. And who gets credit for the R&D and who gets credit for, you know, taking the conversation to different levels. That's always an interesting one. I know there's a lot of like combative energy with Mac O'Grady back in the day, because he was playing the tour, teaching tour players and teaching tour coaches. And a lot of golf coaches have made brilliant careers off of just snippets of his information.
Am I correct in that Bryson DeChambeau is also a big MORAD reader, I believe?
I'm not super familiar with Bryson's, you know, I know he's been around some really good coaches that are really deep into the concepts. You know, The Golfing Machine is obviously the book that, you know, Bryson kind of repopularized when he was going for all that distance and kind of coming out on tour with his quirky style and science-based approach. So, you know, Homer Kelly was Mac O'Grady, one of Mac O'Grady's coaches. And, you know, according to Homer, Mac was the student that knew the golfing machine the best. And I think Mac kind of took it to another level, adding sort of the anatomical aspect of it and the athleticism aspect to it. So it's just interesting how the lineage of information traces back, because it even goes back before, you know, the golfing machine. There's a book called In Search of the Perfect Swing, you know, and if you look at when they published in 1968, and the golfing machine published in 1969, and you can take it back even further than that. There's a lot of great golf coaches that were figuring things out with, you know, protractors and pencils and compasses and black and white photos, and a lot of those truths are still there today.
Is the golfing machine where Bryson gets the whole idea of your upper arm is internally rotated and your lower part of your arm is externally rotated? Because he has a couple of videos where he talks about his own golf swing, and it's in such detail that he's got every little angle out there.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure that would be in the golfing machine, but that's definitely in the MORAD concepts. There's elbow positioning. So, you know, the upper arm bone, obviously the bottom of the upper arm bone is going to be the elbow, and then the top's going to be the shoulder. So just, you know, internal, external, where the elbow is positioned, especially on the trail side, is very important in terms of, you know, kind of where the plane is going to be. And then the lower arm, you know, obviously you got two bones down here, so a radial bone and an ulna bone. So that's where you get the sort of pronating and supinating, because the radial bone can rotate around the ulna bone, or it has a radius. So yeah, in MORAD, I think there's more anatomical alignments and positions. I'm not positive. I haven't studied the golfing machine very deep. So I'm not sure how in-depth they go into anatomical type stuff, but there's a lot of different models in there. It's kind of like a big catalog of information. It's more so than just like a single theory. So if I'm tracing this line going back, my hands are going to be working on their own arc. The club head's working on its own arc. So if I'm going back like this, the club head is, you know, outside of my hands until I get to right there. Then it's on my hands. And then as I go up, the butt of the club starts to hit that line. So, but the way they were teaching it back, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago was like this. And now it's more, I guess, correct, or more just basic, you know, more simple. So I think why the massive change? Why were we going from a swing to now a normal takeaway? And then why do we have to put marketing behind it and sell a product about it? And how is information passed around in the golf industry, and why is it so scattered and disjointed and trivial? You know, I think that's the part that people fall in love with golf, is the trivial aspect of it. And then I think we forget that we're playing a sport. So we go around trying to figure out how to do this thing, and then we avoid doing it. So we never get better. to hit those top line speeds, you're going to have to be pretty efficient, and to start moving the ball and curving the ball, you're going to have to know and understand different, releases and different grips and different,
Right.
So I think everything has a learning curve to it, and there's levels to everything. But if you're going to look at, the next newcomer to the game of golf in America that wants to be great and loves this game and wants to climb the ladder and become a tour winner, it's very hit or miss whether or not they'll be able to get there, just based on the fact that the information is so scattered and disjointed and subjective. How do we get to where the golf instructors start to come together more for the benefit of the future students and the future young American golfers? Because I see the programming in, South Korea, I see the programming in Europe, quite good. You go get a PGA Pro lesson in America, it's not even a coin flip. It's not, you're not going to get much good stuff out there. But at the same time, when you have a situation where, PGA pros are kind of all lumped into the same group, we're all pros, we're all teaching. But to me, if I'm a young guy, 4 or 5 handicap that just kind of loves the game and I want a career in golf, I might become a PGA pro. Well, from a Division I All-American level, a 4 handicap's still quite a student, So there's a big difference between a +6 handicap and a 4 handicap from a learning perspective and from an ability perspective. So you're not going to get to those deeper questions if you're a 4 handicap, because you're not there yet. You're not there yet to ask how to hit a high push draw off of a hanging lie with a 4-iron, because you don't have that ability yet. So as you get deeper into the levels of golf to where you're a tour pro, the conversation gets very, very detailed and very elite. And so you might not have answers to questions that someone who's, a 5th degree black belt might have if you're still a brown belt, And then if you're going to protect the art of the game, then you're going to need a certain level before you have the permission to teach, if you're going to try to protect that art form, So if I'm going to just hop into jiu-jitsu and, think that I'll be able to teach jiu-jitsu, I'm 10 years out right now to even get to a black belt. And that's if I start going a lot. So to protect the game of golf, how do we protect the information and pass the information along in a way that people can hear it and improve and get to where they can break 90 in a short period of time? Because I think if you're going to grow the game and you get guys breaking 90 pretty quick, then you got lifetime golfers. But if you start going into the landscape of golf information right now and you're a beginner, I hear it all the time every day because I do online golf coaching. I hear the students saying, I don't know what's right, I don't know what's wrong, I'm confused. I hear a bunch of different opinions, a bunch of, conflicting information. So it's challenging.
Well, it's awesome that you brought up the phrase grow the game, because you're right. To grow the game, you need to get people up to speed quickly so they have some kind of ability on the golf course. You're right. I think maybe 90, 95 is a good threshold to reach. 6 months. You want to get people up to speed, and to get them up to speed quickly, some sort of common consensus on here's the parameters, here's the range of what a good grip is, here's the range of what a good posture is, versus like a David Ledbetter type. Hey, bro, you went 180 the other way. The A swing is a crime against humanity, dude. A butterfly grip and then matching the angle of the shaft to your spine. Immediately start with setting your wrists. No body turn. Don't turn your hips. Are you trying to kill people, David Ledbetter?
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. It almost makes you think that stuff like that comes out on purpose, just to help golf ball sales and equipment sales. Because if you can't find the answers in how to do it technique-wise, then you're just going to go look for your answers more materialistically. So sometimes I think golf instruction is sabotages golfers on purpose to keep everybody in the perpetual state of unknowing. And if you're in a perpetual state of unknowing and you always look for your answers at the PGA Superstore, then that's a good thing for the club companies. And it's interesting how much power the club companies have over the PGA Tour.
Well, it's called draw biased drivers, draw biased irons, right? At the end of the day, it's like, hey, because the instruction I taught you with this butterfly grip and et cetera, yeah, sure, your club face is always going to be way wide open. But why don't you go get the draw face, the draw biased driver, the draw biased irons? Let's keep you needing, searching for solutions, buying our products. You're almost there. It's that little carrot, right? It's just leading you. You're almost there. Just one little tip. Oh, now I got the B swing this year. Now I got the C swing.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting process. And now, you got lofts and lies or loft angles and irons and speed foam and just very subtle lies, I guess. Just little lies, and you look at the older generation, kind of the 50s, 60s, 70s. I think that those people might have really taken heed to the fundamentals, grip, posture, setup. You get that stuff pretty good. You've got what, like 30 something joints between you and the ground that you're trying to get into a decent spot. So you get these joints into a decent spot in your grip and your posture and your setup. And then now we've got some freedom to move. We've got some freedom to swing a golf club.
You're talking about freedom, and for so long it was about restricting freedom. You removed all athleticism.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So I look at that older generation of like, okay, I see a lot of people, you look at the old school guys, a lot of them look similar at setup, and a lot of them have pretty conventional grips. I mean, you don't see it. I don't see as many outliers. You see subtle outliers here and there, but you see pretty conventional grip postures and setups. And then from there, the golf swing becomes a dynamic athletic movement that's based on your body and your athleticism and your mobility levels and your strength and what you can do. But setting yourself up to have all these joints moving properly is another reason why the conversation now is interesting, because you hear a lot about just get the matchups right. Well, just get the matchups right. Well, then when is this joint going to wear out? Or am I putting my spine in the optimal place to last for X number of reps, for X number of days, for X number of weeks, months, and years? So when we look at who we model our swing after, we look at guys that have already gone through their entire career, So when I look at like a Sam Snead, he's won in 6 different decades. So he's won in 6 different decades. Okay, so he played that long without having a back surgery or without having a wrist surgery or a knee surgery. So then you look at a guy like Jack Nicklaus, who played in 154 straight majors without missing one for an injury. Okay, well then how come these guys that are more athletic nowadays and, are getting hurt? Will Zalatoris getting hurt at a young age, getting cut on at a young age. The kid from Stanford's, I'm hearing, is having back problems, and he's a world beater. A lot of young guys going through these injuries and going through these, career, ending or threatening surgeries. It's not right, in my opinion. I think you got to protect the next generation long term, and I think when you look at the career of a golfer, you're looking at setting somebody up for a lifetime of free movement.
Well, think about how many Golf Digest articles set Jason Day as the model of the modern swing for a while. Your minimum hip turn, and then dude hits mid-30s. He can barely stand up. His back is shot. He has to rebuild his swing. So why don't we cut the phase out where you teach him one swing that he has to rebuild later? Why don't we just teach the rebuilt swing?
Yeah, or just right. Like, well, why did Tiger have to go through what Tiger went through? Think about that. Where he's at in 01, 02, 03. And then he changes his swing, changes his body, changes his training. And then all these injuries start showing up. How do we train a golf athlete from junior golf to winning major championships? I think in the U.S. we're going to have to figure that out.
So in terms of preserving the body, let's get into the topic of rotation.
Yeah. Rotation is another one. Rotating from where and how, and what creates true rotation, and how do you get true rotation to where the spine is very, very protected. As you go up and down the spine, you've got different levels of range of motion in the spine. The lumbar spine, the lower spine, is a stability region. You don't want independent rotation going on in the lumbar region. So to get the lumbar moving well, you got to be accessing your hip sockets well. Well, then if you're going to be accessing your hip sockets well, then you need to be moving your legs well. And if you're moving your legs well, that means your knees, your ankles, and your feet. And your feet means your toes. So there's you know, a chain of movement below the waist that, you know, gets you accessing your hips and displacing your tailbone properly to protect the lower back long term. But then as you move up the spine, you get more and more mobile, and you get into the, you know, the thoracic region and the shoulder girdle. You know, what is shoulder turn? The shoulders are ball sockets. So what do we mean by shoulder turn? Because there's a deep conversation there going on in terms of what's actually happening. And then to, you know, have the cervical spine, which is the most mobile part of the spine from a rotational perspective, if we can get to where, you know, the head, neck, and eyes are pretty steady. I don't say still, because you definitely don't want to keep your head still. The head is going to move, and the eyes are going to move in the sockets a little bit. But the head stays pretty steady. Why does the head need to stay pretty steady? Well, because I don't want my depth perception changing radically throughout the swing, because now my perception of where the ball is changing. So from a training perspective, for males, I notice men like to get tighter in the arm lines, tighter in the chest, tighter in the shoulders, lats, ribs, mid-back, neck. Today's world, posture matters so much, you know, with all of our devices and screens and stuff like that. So how to train properly to protect the lower back, I think, is a very important discussion to have in the golf industry. And then how to get the hand and arm alignments, you know, dialed in so that you can have the plane set up good enough to where, you know, you don't get these weird stalling movements happening throughout the swing to where things stall and throw and jump and bobble and pop. You know, that's a deep conversation. So that when I think of a macro Grady's golf swing, it's essentially true rotation, which is uninterrupted, doesn't stall, it never stops. But to get that true rotation, it's happening through the proper alignments and the proper sequence of movement. It's not that we're just trying to swivel our hips as hard as we can, because that's supposed to create power. And I notice in today's world, it's interesting, the guys that are kind of teaching like really, really opened up and keep the right arm bent and like stay bent over and turned and keep the right arm flexed, you know, they're taking away some important elements there. So I get a lot of people, you know, that struggle with the longer clubs because, you know, they are trying to get into these crazy positions in their body, and then they're sitting at a desk all day, you know, and this is where their coach wants them to get in their golf swing. So I don't know, there's kind of a disconnect between recreational golf and competitive golf, and because there's no regulation to the conversation, it's kind of just all thrown out there, and everybody's just kind of in this perpetual state of try this, try that. So the rotation topic's an interesting one, because there are rotational golf swings. When I think of like a really rotational golf swing, I think of like an Arnold Palmer, or like maybe like a Sam Snead at times in his career, like very clean, very rotational, maybe Ben Hogan too, like kind of flatter golf swings with more depth and steeper tilts, and they could really get the rotation going. But then you also see great golf swings that are very sort of up, down, up, very linear, very steep, you know, like Nicklas, or like Tiger 2000, 2001, I mean, coming down steep so that they can shallow it with their extension and their release. So that's a totally different model than, you know, shallowing it with, you know, your hands and arms and your pivot. So it's like, which model is right? Well, which model is wrong? Well, is either one right or wrong, or are they different? And which one's more efficient? Which one's more effective for hitting a driver versus hitting a flighted little wedge? Because a lot of guys start getting into what we would call CP type mechanics, but then they're like, well, how would I do this hitting a 4-iron at window 9? That's when I got to kind of the Division I level, you start asking those questions about, okay, how do I do this? How do I change the shape, and how do I change the trajectory? And that's where you start to realize that it isn't just one way. There's different ways, and you got to make sure that what you're doing with your mechanics fits the ball flight and the trajectory that you're trying to see from the ball. So the term is getting caught between patterns, and that's the thing you're trying to avoid.
So essentially, in the past, we have, like, you know, a lot of people read Golf My Way, Jack Nicklaus. That's, one type of swing, your head steady. You don't necessarily drop it up and down that much intentionally. Now you got more of like the George Gankas swing where you're going to eat the ball. You got the big rotation. And he's also, like you said, more of like you want to rotate open at impact, correct?
Yeah, I haven't studied that. I mean, I've seen it online and stuff. I've seen kind of, where they're going. That's where I think the search engine optimization part of it comes into play, because if I'm a coach in the year 2023 and I'm trying to attract clientele and people to my world, I'm going to try to optimize the search engine. So then, well, what are most people searching for? Well, usually how to rotate better, how to get the club shallower because they're coming in steep, and how to hit it further, So then all the information starts to get skewed in those kind of directions. And with Western culture, it's very much, more is better, right? So obviously if I don't have enough rotation, then more rotation must be better. And so you kind of get into these situations where it's like, well, at the moment of contact, I need to be the most rotated with the most bent arm, with the most bent over, and it just becomes very, very extreme. And then when you look at the golf clubs in your bag, they're all different lengths. They're all different lie angles. They all have different lofts. So I think that's where the more detailed conversation needs to start kind of showing up, because it's like, okay, rotate. Okay, well, at what point in the swings, like how much, what's too much, what's not enough, shallow, how shallow? Do you want me to be that shallow with my sand wedge too? Or, and then it's a more nuanced conversation, I guess.
It's also strange to me that George Gankas, to me, is the guy who tries to stop early extension. But did Jack Nicklas have some early extension in his swing?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that's the other part that I dislike, because it's very binary, it's right or wrong. It's yes or no. So if all of a sudden early extension gets branded as this negative thing, then you get everybody and their mom trying to push their left glute back through impact. And that's where I'm having issues, with people coming to me saying, I can't hit my long irons. Because you look at the best long iron players of all time, like a Greg Norman or a Jack Nicklas or young Tiger. I mean, they had some, crossing the line type looks, flying right elbow type looks at the top of their backswing, but they would shallow it with, a little bit earlier release and more extension. So they could kick the trajectory up in the air. They could hit a world-class 2-iron or 1-iron, from long range. Where if I'm trying to, turn and keep the right arm bent and keep dragging the handle through impact, how do I hit a 3-iron up in the air? So I think that the golf swing, I would want to err on the CP side of things with my shorter clubs, because I don't want a lot of independent hand action going on through impact with a shorter club. I like to keep, the club head, the butt of the club, and the right elbow just kind of orbiting around the body on concentric arcs, everything kind of orbiting through impact together. But the reality of doing that with a 3-iron and hitting it hard and high is just not there. So as you go to the longer clubs, I think the best long club players were more CF, which is just slang for centrifugal, where CP would be slang for centripetal, and then in between the two would be kind of your inline. And those terms can relate to the path of the swing. Those terms can relate to the release. Those terms can relate to, P5 alignments. But you're right. How do you, extension is powerful. I mean, look at Kyle Berkshire. Look at the world long drive guys. I mean, they're extending as aggressively as possible. And from my spine's perspective, I kind of want to go flexion, extension, flexion, extension. I don't want to have my spine in all these contorted positions throughout the swing. If I'm trying to create force at a high level for many, many years, the spine's number one in terms of what I'm trying to protect. And when I think of like a Greg Norman or a Jack Nicklas or, someone like that, I think they played a pretty long time without getting too hurt. So early extension, yeah, that's an easy one for me to say to a 10 handicap, hey, your butt's coming off the line. Okay. Might not be the end of the world.
How about this in terms of SEO? early extension is actually a good thing. You flip the system on its head and say, hey, what we're fighting against. Remember back in the day, fats were a bad thing and carbohydrates were good.
Right.
Maybe we're going that system where we're being like, hey, bro, you need more early extension.
Right. Right. And you end up having to teach that to guys too, because they'll lose their first power accumulator. So the extension of the right arm, flexion, extension, just how to throw the club head, how to accelerate the club head, how to get the club head going fast. You take that arm away. Okay, well now how do we speed the club head up? You know, and then all of a sudden you got everybody, you know, pushing their left glute back and staying really bent over and trying to turn through there. Then there's no release, there's no extension, so I can't create true loft and I can't accelerate the club head. So that is one of the big challenges I've experienced with coaching the game of golf, is everyone wants everything to kind of stay the same through the bag. But if I'm going to err in the side of world's best long iron players, I'm going to be a little more, you know, I'm going to go with Nicklas or Norman or someone like that. But if I'm looking at, you know, who might be the best wedge player of all time, you know, Zach Johnson hitting little CP draws is pretty good, but you're not going to take him hitting a 3-iron down the stretch, you know. So I honestly have my guys start to think about their bag like, you know, short clubs, middle clubs, long clubs. And if you're going to go out and have the intention of practicing, then I'm going to go out maybe on a practice day when I'm working on my long clubs, and I'm going to have a different energy and a different, you know, I'm going to warm up. I'm going to get my body prepped. I'm going to go rip some drivers. You know, that's a really athletic deal. Then you've got the other side of the game of golf, which is, you know, the wedges and the control of trajectory and control of distance. And so that's the cool part about golf, is it has the yin and yang aspects to it, and you got to be good at both. You can't be a one-trick pony. And I think that's where guys, if they want to do the way opened up, bent arm look, they start to struggle as they get to the longer clubs. I see it all the time.
I was maybe 3 or 4 years ago early extension shamed. I sent one of my workout buddy my golf swing, and he sent it to his brother who I was going to play golf with. And his brother just sent a screenshot of my butt not facing the wall. So you could see I was early extended. And he didn't have to say a word. But at that moment, I try to focus on rotation, and you're trying to get the butt to face, you know, the back camera. I can't really do it. Kind of really botched up my whole swing. I don't feel comfortable. And then all of a sudden you're sewing your head on every shot, trying to get to this, your butt facing the back down the line look. But then as I'm pretty sure it's your videos with the Kyle Berkshire, that guy is pure early extension. How else are you going to get over 200 miles? Yeah. And then you kind of pull out of it to shallow it.
Yeah. So rather than shallowing it with, you know, your forearms or your elbow positioning or your side bend, he's shallowing it by releasing it as hard as he can and just shooting energy straight up. So that, I think, is what's necessary to hit the, you know, world record long drive, you know, speed. And you see that in a Nicklas, you see that in a Norman. I mean, you see Norman coming off the wall a lot when he's hitting a hard 3-iron, and he's maybe the best driver of all time. So
what kind of insanity is this? Greg Norman, best driver of all time with the old clubs until they made everyone a good driver with the modern technology. And now you're saying, hey, that's my point. That doesn't work now? No, that was the best model back in the day.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. No, and that's where I think that search engine optimization stuff, and then how you brand words, you know, that's a huge part of it, because it kind of skews the disposition of everybody to where you kind of hear, you know, everyone kind of saying the same things. Because, you know, you're learning golf online, you're on YouTube, you're just trying to be one of the boys, you're trying to learn the lingo and sound like you know what you're talking about. So it's like, you know, early extension bad, that's an easy one. But if you don't have the right arm and you don't have the extension, I don't know how you drive it very well. Yeah, I prescribe to the idea that it's easier to create one basic swing, like one basic golf swing. Like, just, is the head weight somewhat in balance, and, you know, can you swing the club? So like a kick it forward drill, I think, is a great drill, where you kind of kick it forward, then you swing it up, then you swing it through. Like, that's the swing, the golf swing. Okay, then we can talk about line angles and specifics and sequence and alignments and fine tune it from there. But the swing, I want to get to where the swing's kind of the easy part. Because the swing's a second and a half. so how many thoughts are we trying to throw into that time period? And then how many thoughts can we handle in that time period? So I'm always trying to simplify the in-swing motion stuff. I don't want to have a lot of, thoughts going on in the actual golf swing. Where I feel the thing that varies more is the setup position, P1. I want to develop one basic swing, but I want to be able to get used to many different setup alignments, because I might want to hit a little bit of a draw. So then I might fiddle with a few of my alignments and set up to hit a draw. Or I want to hit a little fade, or I want to hit it high, or I want to hit it low. I mean, I literally cannot know my setup without having chosen a ball flight. So that's one thing you learn kind of later on. Once you get to where it's like, I have a repeatable ball flight. I can do that 90% of the time. Okay, now what? Well, then how do I do this? How do I do that? You don't stay in the golf instruction how to drive a car conversation forever. You start moving past that, and then it starts to get into, okay, high draw, low fade. Well, if I don't set this shot up, then how am I going to hit this shot or expect to see the ball doing what I want it to? Jack Nicklaus has an incredible quote. He says a well-struck golf shot is 50% a mental image of the shot, 40% setup, 10% swing. So you've got the best player of all time telling you that he puts 9-to-1 importance on visualization and setting up. And then once he starts to move the weight of the club, that's the easy part. That's the 10%. Where I think golf instruction puts more and more mental activity into the 1.5 seconds and neglects all the fundamentals. so you're just kind of left going, this isn't very fun, because how many thoughts can I handle? And I'm always trying to get thoughts out of the 1.5 seconds and maybe get thoughts into the visualization and the setting up phase. And that's kind of your way out of too many swing thoughts. Because I want to, when I start to move the weight of the club, simple thoughts, rhythm, balance, tempo, simple stuff. I don't want to be, okay, where's my left wrist at P3? Because the second my mind goes to my left wrist at P3, it leaves the target. So we call that stopping time. Your mind stops time at your left wrist at P3. So now you kill the fluidity of the movement, which is a reaction to where I'm going. So I think that's very much in the Grady stuff too. It's very much like one basic golf swing, but you find out that there's a lot of ways you can tweak P1 to hit these different shots. And so that gets into, ball flight dynamics at the bottom of the arc and setup alignments and, little adjustments that you can make to P1. Because I feel like the thinking, it's not that thinking is bad or wrong, but the thinking in golf is more in the decision-making process. I get to my ball, how is it sitting? How far is it to the front edge? Where's the trouble? Where's the wind? How far is it to the back edge? Where's the, where can I miss it? Where do I not want to miss it? Okay, I'm thinking, I'm assessing my environment so that I can come up with a decision. Now that I've come up with a decision, now it's more about committing to where I'm going. The idea fairy needs to kind of go away a little bit. So now as we get into our pre-shot routine, we're feeling what we're feeling what we're about to do, and then we walk in and we set up and we're seeing what we're about to do, and then mind gets quieter and quieter, and you start to go more into your gut, more into your heart, like I can do this, I trust myself, because I want this mind to kind of start simmering down as I'm standing over the ball and just kind of trust my ability. So I think the use of the brain in the game of golf could be set up in a much better way, because I think all we do is really feed thoughts into that 1.5 seconds, and then we neglect how important the pre-shot routine is and how important the setup and all the fundamental aspects are.
Alex, this has been tremendous. If you want to reach Alex, here's his skill list, and then now you can just be like, hey, had a good time.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. That was awesome.